Hi, everybody. I'm Wendy Murdoch, and this is Webinars with Wendy. I've been doing a series of webinars now for almost a year and a half. It's been just a blast interviewing so many interesting people and finding out about people that are doing so many different things in the horse world, things that you wouldn't come across every day, like the last webinar we did with Laurie and
Terry Nowacki.
Terry Nowacki about scenting. So today it's Laurie Adams, and she's joining us again to talk about search and rescue with horses. Is that right?
Yeah. Yes, and how to find lost horses out in the wilderness. Right.
Welcome, Laurie. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Sure.
So, Laurie, if you would please just give everybody your background, how you ever got involved in search and rescue in the first place. Obviously, you've had horses all your life. I can tell that.
Yes.
But where along that trail did you wind up getting interested in search and rescue?
Well, we live in a small community in Central Oregon, and Camp Sherman. It's along a wild and scenic river, and it's right up against the mountains. And so people know where Bend is.
Oh, yeah.
We're west of that. We're west of Bend, up in just at the foothills. And trying to make a long story short, my husband does business consulting basically around the world. And when we had the kids, I was in the Bay Area. We're both native Oregonians, but we went down to the Bay Area, and I just didn't fit in. And, I said, I can't raise my kids where they pave the forest. And so I ended up coming back up to Oregon. I went to Ponderosa Forest because I'd grown up in Eastern Oregon with that. And I ended up going, we had a group that was starting the search and rescue, because at that point, the late 90s, there just seemed to be more and more people going outdoors and getting either injured or lost or both. And so one of the things that the little 2-room schoolhouse that we had, the teacher and her husband was the deputy sheriff, and they had a youth program. And so my kids all joined, and it's a great way for them to really feel competent. They can spend a night in the woods. That's one of the tests. You have to just have what you take on a day pack and go out in the woods and build your own shelter, build your fire, and just gave them a whole lot of life lessons and to be able to have service to others. And so that's kind of how we started. And then after they all graduated, so they were able to start when they were 14, and then they all graduated and went on to their own things. And so I had horses, and then we were just starting up a horse team for a neighboring county. And so there was an interest in that. And so we did the search and rescue with the horses. And one of the differences, most county sheriffs have posses that is their color guard, and depending on the state, lots of different elements of it. And part of, at least in Oregon, in the Northwest here, part of the responsibility is search and rescue for them, as for the posses as well. But many times being on the other end, so we have a management area of having people come in with horses, and many of the posse was more rodeo based, to say it well. And I was actually at the trailhead one time, and a group from a neighboring county came to help, and the subject's mother that was in a car, and a horse reared and landed on her car, and and so the incident commanders were not really keen on helping. And so that's where we started developing, saying, I started instructing with search and rescue as well. I have a background in education, art, and like I said, fly fishing. And so that's kind of a passion of mine, being able to transfer information, and ended up with the search and rescue, just saying, we really need to make, they can be a valuable resource, a huge resource. And then we learned also with the scenting, we added that to our toolbox, but they really needed training. They needed to not be a liability, and
Right.
and to have the real training. So we were able to put, you could be in part of the posse, but you also had to have your basic search and rescue training, and go from there. And we developed a one where we use the horse as a partner. We talk a lot about the equine sign language, but we use the horse as a partner in multiple ways. Just a simple one is, so if you have a compass, one of the things you have to do in search and rescue is know where you are, know how to do a map and compass. And but if you think about it, on a Western saddle, you have metal, and you have in your horn, and so that messes up the compass. So developing ways to make sure your compass isn't adjusted, and then using, because you have to take a sighting, you have to move your body. Well, if your horse, first of all, doesn't stand still or takes cues from your hips, if you're turning your body from one side to the other to take a bearing on the compass, the horse will start moving. So what we said is, let's just use their ears as a guide, and then we move the horse and use our turning on the haunches or turning on the forehand to be able to set our sight, and then making sure it's not it's away and the horse is under control, but really having some good lateral control with the horse to be able to move. So using as a partner, we can go a lot farther, because we can see farther for the leapfrog type of a thing. So using the compass and we teach map and compass, even though there's GPSs and they work well, but they are a electronic device that will stop at some point when it runs out of batteries, and hopefully the map and compass won't, as long as you have the knowledge in your brain. So
Yeah, sometimes old school is the way to go, because you lose power and you're done.
it is. And the phones now have a lot of those kinds of things on them as well, but that's the same thing. I mean, you'll lose power, and you can't reach anyone, and so if you don't know where you are and what you're doing, then then we have to come in and help.
Yeah, exactly. So by the way, somebody said that Kathy said she really enjoyed your last webinar, and I'm curious about the size of your town, because I live in a really tiny town, but I am not so far out as you are.
We at Camp Sherman is a tiny town. We grow in the summer, I mean, but we have in the area about probably 200 full-time residents. So, but we're close to it's an hour away to the largest city, a half hour to a medium-sized city. Bend is the larger city, where I like to say we're 3 hours away from any escalators. So, that's in Portland. So we're 3 hours away from Portland. But
right. So you really are in a remote area. Like, I live in a town of 130 people, but I'm 50 miles from Washington, D.C. So
yeah.
I wouldn't call it remote. I would call it rural.
Yes.
Whereas I would say you are more remote.
Yes, more remote. And we can, the wilderness, which goes, the whole Pacific Crest Trail is from where I keep my horses, it's 6 miles. I can ride to the wilderness and then hop on the PCT and go the full length of the country. So we
Wow.
are very close. We border, the national forest is all around our private property, and then we border the wilderness as well. So we can get away from other
So,
people.
all right. So what you're going to talk to us about using horses for search and rescue. I'm just curious, is there a specific kind of horse that's really good at this job, or is this a job that any horse can do?
Any horse can really do it. We do the it's just amount of training. I mean, and being able to to work in an environment where you do need that partnership. And that's one of the reasons that with what we do with Terry, with equine sign language, is that there are lots of times on a rough trail, we let the horses have their heads, and we ride on a loose rein for the most part, just because they can pick their path a whole lot better than we can. And they're going to be much safer than if we say, no, you need to go this way. There are a few instances where we have to direct them if they're herd bound. But one of the things we do we have each state has their own certification for a search and rescue part of it. Oftentimes it's with the posse, and it says what you have to be able to accomplish. And one of the things is not have them herd bound, so they can independently operate, being able to stand patiently, be able to handle by multiple people, being able to be trailered in multiple trailers, be tied to a trailer. Lots of search and rescue is hurry up and wait until we get in our assignment. And then so they stand. We were on a mission up in Crater Lake National Park, and there was a young autistic boy that was lost, and it was snowing hard, and their incident command, which is the people at that time, it's the Park Service, and there were multiple counties, but they were going through, could we go across country and all these kinds of things. And so we accumulated about 8 inches of snow on the back of our horses. And fortunately, we have saddle covers, but it's the kind of thing where we had to have them outside the trailer, because at any minute we were going to say go. And as we sat there waiting,
Wow.
but having them being patient and just a lot of it is just, it's training. It's being able to use that training.
How far an area do you cover? In other words, can you be called in anywhere in Oregon, or is there a certain district?
So basically the search and rescue is all organized by county, and then counties have mutual aid with each other. And so ours, depending on we're considered a resource. And so depending on the resource that we have, so different counties might have a swift water, or they might do a high angle technical teams. And so they'll use different teams for different purposes. So we can be called across the state. With the air scenting, we try to do that as a regional, so being called, but again, to different areas. But it's a little bit of a challenge to in this part of the country to get people to understand that the horses consent, and they'll oftentimes use the dogs because they're familiar, and there's a lot of investment in the dogs as well. And so
I don't know if you probably didn't get called in, but Not long ago, there was a light aircraft that went down in Oregon.
Uh-huh.
And the pilot and the co-pilot were found by search and rescue. It happened to be my dear friends from Vashon Island that were.
Oh, really?
Yes.
Well, actually, I think I was on that one as a recovery for the plane. They landed in starts with a P. Oh, Paulina Lake.
Yeah.
Is that, it was a couple of years ago?
No, this is actually this year, a few months ago.
Oh, oh, okay. Then
Yeah.
no, I didn't.
Yeah, okay.
But
This year their light aircraft engine went out and they landed in the top of some trees, and Oregon Search and Rescue found them.
Yeah. Well, we've done, that's another thing we do is recovery of things, but there was an airplane that landed, people were able to get out safely, ran out of fuel, engine problems, and they landed, the only place they could land was on the lake, which it was not a float plane. And then they were able to get out, and some Boy Scouts were there, so we knew where it was, but then we had to, it's a pretty pristine lake and had to be removed. And so we packed in a recovery team that floated the lake and with the horses. That's another thing. We just have them experience lots of things. And we had a helicopter, a great big helicopter come and lift, and the horses are probably 50 feet away from the helicopter, and they just turned their backsides to the wash and stood there very quietly. Had lots of people nervous. They go, "Don't you want to move them?" And I go, "No, they're good." and so those are kinds of things that we can do. We also do with the horse team, because we can carry things. You can't use mechanical in the wilderness. Historically, they don't allow airplanes and an aircraft or motorized in the wilderness. And so even for body recovery, or if there's a fatality or something, the horses, we bring them in. And so that's another thing we can offer search and rescue is a body recovery. And we train for that. So the horses, it has a distinct smell and those kinds of things. And so that's a little sad, but we try to be very respectful, and the horses are great. So we train them to pack and to also do patient. We've had a couple where some hunters have been injured, and we had a ground team going in, and it was 4 miles for the ground team, but because of the downfall, and they took them over 2 hours. We did 11 miles on horseback up and around and got to them. And by the time we got to them, it took us an hour and a half to be able to hoof it. And they'd still only made 2 miles. And so we were able, this gentleman, able to package him and stabilize his leg. And we ponied in, I had a paramedic with us that could do some of the treatment. And then we took them back out the other way. We walked them, the horses, and then we're able to do that. So they can be really useful in particularly in the mountainous area. And it's all about training. I mean, so it's not any particular type of horse. I have gaited horses, and I will tell you, some of the people enjoy that. I was on one of the partner, Kate Beardsley, and I were doing some packing for the Forest Service, and her horse got stung by bees, and she came off and landed, and so landed on a root wad and had some. I was pretty sure I'm a wilderness first responder, which is just can figure out things out in the wilderness. It's first aid for out there, but I figured she had some internal injuries, and my gaited horse is long legged and I had to hoof it out in front of him, but got her up on top of him, and we have protocols. And it was one of those things that, again, practice. I knew that the biggest challenge was to hold her and say, you are the patient now.
Yeah, really.
You're not part of the team. You're not going to tell me. And put her on the horse. And as a gaited horse, I had to trot in front of him to keep up, but we were able to cover 4.5 miles in just under an hour with a patient. They're smooth. So that would be the only other thing, is that having, anybody needs to be able to ride the horses. They need to be well trained. So
all right, so let's get into your topic.
Okay. Let me see if I can share my screen. Let's see. Oh, don't see the one show all windows. I've got too many windows open, it looks like.
Sometimes that happens.
Let's see. Go back. All right, sorry about that. Just take just 1 minute. Why isn't this?
We're on the edge of our seat.
Yes, I know. Okay. Well, there it is. No, that's a different one. Okay, must be down here. There we go. All right, share. Okay. You can see this now?
Yep.
Do you see it as the presentation or as a?
No, not as a presentation yet. I just see it as
Okay.
working, if you're going to make changes.
Yes.
There we go.
There we go. Okay. Now, do you still see me as well, or?
Yeah, you're on the right-hand side.
Okay.
Full screen.
Okay.
And people are impressed with the amazing work you do, by the way.
What?
They're impressed with the amazing work that you do.
Oh, good. Well, lots of diversity, and it's one of those things. Growing up on a ranch, having horses was part of. You had a purpose, and I really enjoy being able to have them with a purpose, and it gives me kind of incentive and motivation to get out there and really work with them as well. So. This is what Rebecca had talked to me about, as she's written the articles on the loose horses in different areas and how to do that. But also we've had multiple horses that have been out in a wilderness area and having to go out and find them and use them. I'm going to put this in as well. So I was just gonna, oh, nope, that's not it. Okay, there we go. Just a little bit about me, the lifetime horse owner, ranch in Central Oregon, search and rescue since '99, mounted educator, mounted SAR educator. And I also do the, if you're familiar with the EGALA, which is a equine assisted growth and learning, and I've been an equine specialist with them, and then on the equine rescue. So a lot of the information that I have is kind of practical, and to be able to prepare for, and it works for both just loose horses, but lost horses as well. It's out of experience, doing a daily routine. So kind of preparing at the barn, at your home, having some kind of a routine. Most people are going to give a supplement or a grain on a regular basis, and use the science of Pavlov, is that associate the food with the sound, and actually give it to them on a regular basis, on a routine. And one of the things we found on, we call it the Fletch search, which was 2017, was that we would say, okay, how do you call your horses in? And she says, well, I normally call this the Suey. It was Susie was the lead mare, and so she would call Susie in, and that was after a while when you're doing this, because we were on this search for just about a week, and then a fire broke out, so about 2 weeks. But at least calling a long time, your voice gets very tired, and having something besides that, besides a voice, to call in an animal, a horse. One of the things we do in traditional ground search and rescue is that we have a whistle, and I'll just do a little plug for international distress sign is 3 blows on a whistle, or 3 of anything. And then the response of anyone that's coming to help you is 2. So if you ever hear 3, or you are in need of something, doing them in a group of 3 is what you want to do. We use whistle, and then we also use, for people, we use calling their name, because sometimes if a person is hyperthermic or not completely aware, if they've been out there a while, they'll recognize a name, so it's a different tone. The whistle is easier to do. The voice calling them is much more difficult after a while, because you become hoarse, and so you don't want to having to do that. So one thing I've come up with my horses, and have actually used it. I came off one time out in the woods, and I sent my friend Kate up after I'd gone into the hospital, but my horse was out, and I said, well, take the dinner bell, or just ding on 2 pieces of metal. And sure enough, between that and the truck noise, he popped right back up, and and she was able to bring him back. But having like a dinner bell, it's easily replicated. So you can ring the bell when they get the food, before they get the food. My horses come in, they know that sound is, if they ever get out, which occasionally I've got a Houdini that could open 3 different types of latches on a single gate. I have 3 latches. You can get them open, but I just ring the bell, and they know that they're going to get there. I do supplement and a little bit of so that they like that, and so they come in on a regular basis. You can, because the dinner bell is loud enough, you can hear it, but also it can be replicated out by somebody else, by not you. You can say that's the sign for them to come in, and ding it. And you can just take 2 pieces of metal, or you can, to make that same kind of noise, you can do that anywhere. So anyone can do it. So some people use a whistle or those kinds of things, but some of us searchers can't whistle. And so that's a really good start, just so they associate and with the food and the sound. Wendy, do you use anything like like a call in or?
I call him, I call my horse's name. His name is Al, and they're,
Mhm.
and they come in. But they finally just figured
Yeah.
that out. It's taken a while.
Well, and it, a lot of people do, if ever they get completely away and you have to have somebody else, then having that same, they're very sensitive to the pitch and those kinds of things. So having something that's really common is a good thing to.
My guys are very sensitive to the meal bucket we make their food up in.
Yeah. Yes. Yes. So this one is develop that relationship with your equine. And this is a shameless plug for the equine sign language. I do, Terry does, and specifically reading what they're telling you, and then also knowing your own human sign language that you're communicating to them, because we transmit, if we're hyped up, if we're excited, that excites them. If we're calm, it excites them. Equines are a herd animal, and even if they're just by themselves, they're constantly, they want a herd and they need a herd, and they've allowed us in as part of the herd if we become a good leader. And being a trusted leader to them is another part where they know that you're going to take care of them, and they can follow you and be able, as opposed to just being a beast of burden, that they understand that they don't need to get away from you, that if they're out and lost, that you are their leader, and they might be frightened, but for them to come back to you, because you've developed a relationship. And then it's also trusting them, developing some of that at the barn, or at your home, or wherever that happens to be, developing what they're telling you and understanding what that is. So in some of the things that on the classes that I do, it's not horsemanship, it's different. So it doesn't matter which side they're on, but what you are doing is having them changing your body language so that they'll come and follow you, and they make a choice. They don't have to, because the goal is to keep a loose lead line, and that they will follow you. They'll stop, they'll start, they'll be able to turn, and then to unhook that lead and be able to have your changing energy, your changing your direction, and giving them the equine sign language, kind of speaking their language, and practicing that even when they're not in an enclosed area. Practicing that, then you can really tell whether or not they trust you as their leader. If they will stop and start without a halter on, or without a lead rope on. I do some with just a rope around the neck that's attached, and that way it's different with the training. Lots of times when we do different types of training, we'll change the tack, and so there's different tack that we use for a reining horse. There's different tack I use for air scenting. There's different tack that I use for showmanship or horsemanship. So I'll change what I communicate with them on their face, and one of the ways is just to put a loop around their neck, not a halter, and have them move and follow. What that does is, if you're out and about, there again, you know that if you change your body language, you speak their language, you're going to be able to have them draw in and like the join up, but it's a little different in that it's you being their leader. They're going to come to you and just practicing them choosing to follow you instead of us always directing them with a line. And so that's another thing to practice, and having that ahead of time. Oops. We, as all of us know, have human body language, sign language. I'm going to call it sign language because it's multidimensional. Folded arms, stiff upright, they can mean all kinds of different things. And how we approach and being very conscious of what we're saying, what we're projecting, what we're telling the horses, because they totally depend on 75 or more percent on reading the sign of other horses. They have a little bit of the language part, the vocalization, but for the most part, it is watching the sign, and they're very observant. We did some tests with Terry with a Mustang, and they very much watch our eyes. So we had the Mustang doing the same kind of a walking, stopping, changing your body, lifting, looking where you want to go, and then just looking down again when you want to stop, all on a loose lead. And this horse was doing it just fine. We thought, wonder what happens. So he put sunglasses on, and immediately the horse's head went up, his whole body position went up, because he couldn't see his leader's eyes, and he couldn't see and read that particular part of it. So he was much more nervous. And we have that documented on a couple of different horses. Some of the horses that are older and don't really care didn't seem to have a big, I mean, they'll follow whoever. Got a 34-year-old horse that is my basic horse, and he'll follow anybody anywhere, and it didn't make a difference if we had sunglasses on or not. But definitely the Mustang and the younger horses, depending on where they were in the herd order, really made an effect. This particular Mustang was higher up in the herd order, and so it was just fascinating watching the difference. So just being able to be aware of our own sign language, our human sign language, and how it affects the horses. They have intuitive, they use it all the time. They use it in the wild to find minerals, to find water, to find vegetation, and they're communicating with each other all the time. Because as a herd, you can watch them, they'll move synchronous, I never quite get that word right, but in sync with each other. They will move around, and there has to be a communication of some sort. And in order to do that, not to run into each other and have the whole thing. So they're constantly communicating. They are constantly trying to trial and error with us, trying to communicate with us as well. Here's the clinic. This is a picture of Terry's book, the Equine Sign Language and Communication. Again, just talking about all the different areas and then the combination language. If you're interested, if anyone's interested, you can contact me there. So the other part is what to take and what to plan for. So this is kind of at your trailer, at your barn, wherever it is. If you're going to go out, just know the difference between your tack. So one of the things that we found and particularly we've looked for some horses that were part of endurance rides, that a lot of the endurance people, because the horses sweat and lather, they've gone to, it's more of a nylon based, or it's a plasticized base, because it's easily washed and it's very durable. The disadvantage with that is that those, if a horse does get loose, they can get caught up in something, particularly if they have all their tack on, they can get caught. And then what happens is they'll usually die of lack of water, because they'll get snagged, and a leather one will break. Much more the power that the horse can exert on it will break a leather halters and leather parts of your saddle, the cinches, those kinds of things can, if they get stuck in a tree or branches, those will break. The nylon based or the synthetic based don't. And if they're fortunate to be out long enough, they weather, and they've just shown that the horses, you can do good control, but the power that they can exert on it, even in a distressed area, can break. One of the things we recommend is, particularly if you're out and where you guys are, I know that there's some larger parks, but so I just kind of do this as a general. It's helpful to have a halter under the bridle, and that can be a very small rope halter, or they have emergency ones. One of the reasons is if you ever get off, having reins or a lead rope that clips and unclips, so you're not trying to pull or move a horse with a bit. The bit's designed to be pulled back. If it's pulled forward, it pressures the mouth and it communicates to the horse an entirely different way. And so having the lead rope to a halter, there are bridle halters that don't give the indication, any indication on the bit. You can just unhook it and hook it onto the bridle halter, are really good options. And having a lead rope separate, or reins that disconnect, that are easy, because one of the things that happens if you're not in control of the reins, if the reins drop or can't be disconnected, that can easily, I've had horses actually break their necks because they pulled back, and the way that the mouth and their head was torqued, it just snapped their neck, but it also will break their teeth. And even if they don't get stuck, if they're not able to eat out in the wild, then that causes an issue as well. So having a lead rope.
Somebody's got a question about the rope halters that everybody uses, and a lot of them use under their bridles. They're a nylon, so they're not going to break, right?
That is true. The rope halters are typically a nylon. One of the concepts with that one is that it's not as in the mouth and control with the bits and those kinds of things. With the rope halter, when I'm going to do it, it makes a loop at the top, and you can do a little breakaway on that part. We use that with our wild horse, with the Mustangs. You just tie a piece of baling twine between where you loop it through, and then that creates a breakaway. And then they don't get hung up.
A lot of people, think about the rope halters underneath their bridles and stuff, but if a horse gets hooked up on that rope halter, that's not going to give if it doesn't.
No.
Yeah.
You're right. Sometimes those, because of the design of them, they will come off easier than other ones will off of their heads in a forward motion. So a horse will, if they pull back, but that is another good idea, is to do a breakaway. And oftentimes I'll do a leather breakaway, just a leather strap, and put that through the loop and tie that through the top on anything I want to. Instead of baling twine, I just don't like the look of baling twine.
I agree with you.
on everything. It looks a little tacky. So I just, you can get the leather shoelaces and those kinds of things really easily, and that becomes your breakaway. It takes more for the horse to break it, and so I don't have it. That seems to work well. Any other questions on that part?
Nope.
The having a tree strap, or sometimes people make sure they have hobbles. Hobbles can work very well, but you do have to, again, train your horse. If you're going to have a horse tied to a tree for very long, we recommend not doing that, because if they paw or anything, it'll kill the tree in the national forest. But having something so that you can secure the horse if you need to use a facility or be out there where you can't necessarily be in control of the horse. This one that got loose was a borrowed horse practicing for an endurance ride, and she had eaten lunch. She had just turned around and to pick up one more thing off the ground, but she didn't have the horse contained, and she didn't have a lead rope, and she had just the reins, and the horse just pulled the reins. I mean, I think she actually just had the reins over his neck in a loop, and just that moment, it's like it's out of reach, grabbed it, and he took off. And so that's where, if it's just a short amount of time, I mean, I give the caveat that we don't want to tie them to trees, because it can damage them, but a high line's another thing, but that oftentimes takes time. But just a tree strap, throw it around so that you can do what you need to do, and your horse stays with you or stays contained of some sort. One of the things is to have the 10 essentials. I didn't grab my slide. I have another slide or another presentation that could go through 10 essentials, and having it on your person. So as opposed to on your saddle. One of the first things to do is make sure, in search and rescue, our mantra that we do is take care of yourself, take care of your team, then take care of the subjects. And we do that again and again and again, is that you're not any good to anybody if you get hurt or you're not able to function. And the same thing with this. Yes, our horses are beloved, but if they run off with everything, your cell phone, your everything you need to survive, or you're going to be in a world of hurt, and you can't help your horse or anyone else if you're not able to do that. So the 10 essentials, at another time, if you'd like me to go into any of those, I'd be happy to, but on your person. So it doesn't have to be a lot. You can get most everything in. I wear a little, like a fanny pack. I also have a very small hydration pack for my water that I wear on my backpack that has enough for me to have the rest of the 10 essentials, which is navigation, a light source, a heat source, extra food, extra warmth, are the basic elements of 10 essentials, but that becomes imperative for anyone to be able to have, and not to have it. I duplicate it on my saddle, but having it on your person. Having some kind of a treats, however, some people are not really in favor of that, but having something that your horse likes. I keep them on my saddle, and not necessarily my 10 essentials, which might be a good idea, but I keep them because I do the air scenting and I use them for that. But something is a good idea to have some source of enticement back that your horse is used to. Some people do peppermint candies or something like that. Something that you can entice a frightened horse back to you as well, or use it for someone else. The callback sound, like I said, whether that's a bell, something on a regular basis that you can let know where you are. That's one of the big things with a map and GPS, but knowing where you are going to be, and being aware of that, of your situation. That I tell people when they get out of their truck or their trailer, find north right then. So and then if have a map, so you know where you are, because phones now are much better, but again, as we've mentioned, phones fail, and so having an idea of where you are in the world keeps you oriented, so that if you need to tell somebody which direction the horse went cross country, you're able to at least give a general. They went southwest, they went some way. So knowing where you are. Another good thing is a picture of your horse's track. We do children's grab hug a tree and survive is for them, and for children out in the wilderness, and even adults, you take a print and like have a little piece of foil and everybody steps on it, so we can see the track, and we leave that in the car or leave it in your truck and trailer. But if you also, with phones now, you can take it just so if it's shod, how big it is, put a ruler or a glove or something next to it, so that on a regular basis, then we're able to, if we do need to track it, we can distinguish it. If it's a heavily used trail, we can distinguish your track from other tracks that have been on there. But having that is a really handy, expedites the whole search process.
Someone's asking, they have brass fixtures on their halter, not steel. Are they breakable enough as advertised to be safe?
I don't know about that. I would think that the brass might. It's a softer metal, and so it's possible. But usually what breaks first is the leather before the brass. But if they had a synthetic, I look at a lot of used nylon halters, and even on the nylon ones, unless the brass they're usually molded. Mm-hmm. So if they advertise them breaking, I would make sure that it has a point where it separates, that it's not a molded piece,
right?
That it's a connected piece. Does that make sense? So that it actually has been connected, and that would be the point that it would move apart. But the molded ones, like on halters and stuff, they don't seem, the wear and tear of even the nylon will go first. But
And on lead shanks, on lead ropes and things, would it make sense that you would want a breakaway piece connecting the halter to the lead if you have a continuous, like a rope one? Or is that?
No, if they get away, I wouldn't do a breakaway, because that's one of the ways that if you have the lead rope, that will slow the horse down.
True.
Because you want that to stay connected. And typically if that gets caught somewhere, they're going to be standing there, and then it'll be close. It'll be close, and them stepping on it. That's why I do like at least not the short lead ropes. I like about a 12-foot lead rope, just because they'll catch it on their front feet and their back feet, and training them to yield to that pressure and not to continue going. So they'll stop with that pressure. That's another training technique.
Yep.
We are running out of time. That was Rebecca has written articles.
Okay, if you go over, you don't panic.
Okay. Rebecca's written articles, really excellent. What she's saying, a lot of the same kind of thing that I'm talking about is really having that equine sign language. You can see here, if you run up quickly, running your arms, what are you communicating to that horse? If you're a leader, you're saying, there's something scary out there. And you want to be calm. You want to walk. You don't want to chase after them, because they're frightened and they're going to move away. You want to entice them to come back. You want to be relaxed, calm. And I typically say, because we work a lot with wild horses as well, you keep your gaze down, you back to the horse, and just use your peripheral vision if you don't know the horse. Now, if you know the horse, it's your horse, having that relationship, building that relationship becomes essential, but not running after them. The first stage of if you lose a horse out in the wilderness, you need to assess yourself. I mean, have you come come off? And that would be the first one. So again, take care of yourself. Where are you mentally? So you're really ticked off, you're really frustrated. You gotta let that go, because if you approach your horse because you're really mad and you're swearing at him because he made you walk for a half mile down a steep trail, I can tell you he's going to tell that, and he's not going to want to, or she's not going to want to come up close to you. So assess yourself physically, and then do a mental assessment and say, all right, what can I do, and how can I get the horse to come to me and see me as his leader, that I'm a safe person and that he's going to want to be with me. Where are you? Make sure you get that recorded. Are there other horses around? Again, don't have them chase them, but possibly have the horses move around a little bit in a direction so they'll come back by you. So horses will, again, want to be with a herd. See how you can use those. Is the horse nearby? Has he stepped on his lead rope? And then be able to look and see where it is. So again, horses will typically want to stay on a trail, and they're going to continue on to that trail. They're going to take an easier route. So being able to walk around the horse, get at least on their side, they have a balanced line in the middle, and that other horses will use to move horses. So you want to come up and not come directly from behind, because they're just going to continue going down the trail. You want to get off the trail try to circle or come at them at an angle or the side, not from behind. Look around for natural barriers that you can have, that you can bring the, so if there's a big field to the side, or if there is a ravine, then they're not going to typically go there. So use that ravine, use those natural, what we call barriers for travel, use those for your advantage. So just look around, try to think about it as a map on a table or something, so that you're not sending them down the road, but you're trying to contain them. And that's one of the first things, is think about containment physically with your environment, and then by your actions. Cell phone, if they're out of sight, you're by yourself, you can't, no other horses, you haven't seen them, do you have service? Immediately, as quickly as you can, notify a friend, have them go to the trailer or wherever you started from. Horses have this great ability to scent, and that scenting, they know where they came from. They know where home is. They know where their trailer is. They know where other horses typically are. So doing that quickly. The Fletch one that we had, she waited, it was a borrowed horse. She was afraid of telling her friend that she borrowed the horse from. So she tried to figure it out. She didn't notify the owner and didn't get us on the scene for over 24 hours. So yeah. And so we weren't able to do it. Take a picture in that environment of your horse tracks. If you can find what's called a track trap, which is a softer dirt, mud, an imprint, even in the trail, get a picture of it right there, so that then we can differentiate between those. Oops. Well, that was the the end of that. I was going to show you stage 2 then is to contact the your search and rescue group, and then and many times the search and rescue, a posse or a mounted ones, will help with a whole service. Let me see if I'm going to stop sharing for just a moment and share a different screen. Okay.
Yep.
And if you want to.
Well, somebody's saying that when my horse was young, I trained her to ground tie, and then I simulated falling off, and she stops when I come out of the saddle, as a roper has for horses that stop when you dismount. It's pretty smart.
Yes, yes. And ground tying is great. I would still, because you have the lead rope, I would still be cautious, because what happens many times in our area is they'll get stung, which kind of all bets are off, particularly if they continue to sting them in the process.
Yeah, it's a really good idea to have some connection between you and your horse.
Yes.
When I was in Botswana in '98, we had a woman that came from Switzerland, and we were moving camp. We were going to fly camp, and she was on a off the track thoroughbred. And we got off our horses, and she did not hold on to her horse because she did not have to hold on to her horse at home.
Right.
Well, this horse decided to take off and go back to base camp. And our poor guide left us sitting there with the gun in the grass while he jumped on a horse and I catch that one. So it's a good idea to have a connection between you and your horse, even if they ground tie.
Okay, so I'm just going to show some of the other work that we do. So we use a lot of the same techniques that we use for search and rescue with the lost horse. What we did is from this first one, I don't know if you can see, does that make it bigger?
Yep.
Okay. This first one is the main highway. You can kind of see the main highway here. This was an area that the person had gone to. And so there were some lakes right around here. She actually, on a later screen, I'll show you, it was about, I think it was about 5 miles away. Let me just see. You can see it kind of on this one. I couldn't get them all because it connected it too much, but it was probably 5 miles away. So this is where she was camping and had gone. And so this point last seen, the PLS, is where she'd stopped. There's a little lake here. She'd stopped there and had lunch. Like I said, was getting back, had most of their lunch packed, and had one last thing that she reached for, and the horse spooked. As best we could see, she followed him.
Or could you just close the navigation screen, the little X to the right of navigation, and then it'll be bigger for us. Great.
There you
Thank
go.
you. Perfect.
And so she came all the way back here. We found out again, it was 24 hours later that we actually heard about it. Went back up there. I came back up with my GPS, marked these. And then this is the point where the horse went off the trail. It kind of widened. You can see the natural barriers of the terrain closer together. They're hills. So this went through down a hill, and this is where the horse had gone off. We start by doing, at that point, we organize people. We need to make sure all of our searchers are safe. We have communication with them, and they have an assignment. So we were able to get, this was just before an endurance ride. So we had lots of people that were up there, and lots of people wanted to help, but they just wanted to go out and ride. And they're endurance riders, which means they go fast and not necessarily really watching for things. And so we set up a headquarters or a incident command, which gave them just two-way radios. We set up some relays because it's poor communication. They could get a little bit of cell coverage in some areas. And we set up containments. And that's what you can kind of see here. So here is a containment. We went around the edge of this area. And then after we could see that there weren't tracks going out of that area, then we would do a grid back and forth. And you can see the different areas where we could find where the horse had been, had stayed, and there's areas that we couldn't cover because it was too dense. And so we were able to look a little farther. You can see some other containment areas that we did. Here is another containment. We went all the way around here. You can see this is kind of a low line area, lots of deadfall. Here's another containment. And then the additional ones would be, we would do a grid if we thought this was a high probability of areas. We sent people up and around the outside to make sure that he hadn't crossed that. So that is part of, you narrow down the area. So you look at the areas, use natural boundaries, natural travel barriers, and then look to see if they've come across or tracked on that. We, at this one, had him, and I'll just finish up really quick, sorry. We had him down to, let's see. No, that's the camp there, but we had him down to about less than a half a mile after we were 4 days into it. Wow. He didn't have a water source here. We spent a lot of time doing a lot of looking around other water sources. So that was our biggest thing. We carried water in because we thought he might got hung up, so he would have been thirsty, because it would have been, we didn't actually get out there until to day 2. And so by 4 days, we were able to get out there. One of the things that is sad about this one, but also shows the importance of having somebody who's trained, is that the owner of the horse was out there with me. We were riding, we were actually dragging things behind us, so because the horse would come back to the trail, and we could see as he'd continue to come back, be back there for a while. It's a canyonous area, so the sound would travel as best as we could see. He'd come back, but so we would swipe out, we drag a branch and rocks behind us so that our tracks didn't confuse with his tracks. And that we were right on it. We were very close. He circled around, we're pretty sure, right behind us. And that night we had a big thunderstorm, and the owner wanted to spend the night. And I said, we had some big strikes close to us. I said, no, it's not safe. You can't stay out here. And she kind of argued with me a little bit. And I said, no, there's a really good chance of fires. There's no communication. I can't, I mean, you're a grown person, but I can't help anymore. I will not be part of this if you don't follow my directions. Sure enough, that night we came back out. We're going to come back early in the morning. We had a lightning strike, and that became a very large fire. We had people in the field the next day, and the Forest Service asked us to take our team and go evacuate, let people know on the Pacific Crest Trail, which is this blue in here, to have them leave the area, close, and let them know that this was an imminent danger. This became a very large fire very quickly. Winds changed and moved, and so we had to stop. But we were very close to getting him, and it was very frustrating. We have not found any evidence of him, but afterwards. But the primary thing again was people safety. The Forest Service was very appreciative that we were able to go up and let campers know on the Pacific Crest Trail that there was a very possibility. This whole area burned, and
how big an area are we looking at here?
These are, let's see, let me pull up one last, let's see. Can I share a different screen? How does that?
So the person who was riding the horse didn't report it for 24 hours, which is why this situation, most likely why the situation ended the way it did.
Yes, and she felt horrible, and she was in her 80s, so, and she was riding by herself, and she thought she could catch up and catch it. And then she got back to camp and couldn't find it, and went out the next day with just a friend and hiked some more, and then finally couldn't find her, and called the owner, and then they called us in. But it wasn't until the next day. I mean, 48 hours had passed.
So the moral of this story is, if you lose your horse in wilderness, call immediately.
Yes. And call somebody, I mean, or get down to the trailhead, or get somewhere, because the horse, you can see this is where the horse would have gone, was headed back home. Went off trail here, but we would have been able to find it right away. But it was heading home, most likely.
Right.
Or headed back to a trailer. And so that's where I say, call somebody, let them know you're okay, first of all, but also let them get somebody on that trailhead where the trail is, where your trailer is. And then really talking to search and rescue people or somebody to organize, because that's the other part of this. We had several people that were just, oh, we'll go look. And so they just rode. Well, it could have contaminated the area. I had to spend a whole lot of time trying to evaluate. Yes, we saw horse tracks here. Well, whose were they? Were they the people who were helping out or what? And so, and just keeping, we had 25 people out in the field, and I feel, I mean, as an incident commander in this situation, feel very responsible for those, making sure we have communication. And then all of these, I have GPS, so I could give them a GPS. I'd bring it back, download where it has been, so I could plan the next day's assignments. And for the most part, I was able to print out maps, give people assignments, tell them what we'd like them to do. They come back in, report. And then I made sure everybody was back in, everyone was safe. And just those are standard operating procedure for search and rescue, but many times don't get applied. It's not, no one takes the time to apply those standards
Right.
to the horse world.
And of course, the storm, which you were very concerned about, did turn out to be a fire.
Yes.
And,
Yes. And that would have been very unsafe for her, because she wouldn't have known necessarily. The wind was blowing a different direction, but it burned right in the area right here,
yeah.
where we knew where we thought he was. So yeah, this is the Milliken. So the fire hit right here and then burned right into this area, and then swept around and burned all of this and all the way to the town of Sisters.
Wow.
Yeah. And it did it very fast. So I've probably taken more of your time, but
If somebody's
yeah.
asking when this was.
This was 2017. It was in August, and it was right before the eclipse. So one of the other problems were we had a full view of the eclipse in this area, and so we were inundated. And so all of the sheriff's department, which would oftentimes help with this, were occupied in trying to figure out how to handle it all. But yes, this was.
I remember this because I take groups to Africa for horseback safari, and somebody was coming from Oregon, and between the smoke and everything, her flights she never made it.
Yeah.
So that's why I was like, oh, I know that one.
Yes. Yep. So.
Oh, wow. All right. Well, just go ahead and unshare your screen and we'll wrap this up. So
okay.
I think the take-home message, as always, is preparation. Being prepared if you're going to go out in an area, in wilderness especially, where there's the possibility that your horse could come loose for any number of reasons, bees being one of the ones that you've mentioned a couple times.
Yes.
But for any reason, that it's safety first, preparedness, and then if anything happens, immediately call for support.
Yes. Yep. That sounds good.
Yeah. Well, I want to thank you so much for joining me, Laurie. This is, once again, it's really fascinating. Where I live, our distances are much smaller. I do live, my county backs up on Skyline Drive, so we do have wilderness. I had bear just the other day. But we don't have the incredible acreage, just sheer size that you guys have out there. And it's beautiful country. I've been out to Bend, and it is gorgeous country out there. So I want to thank you so much for joining me today and presenting this. This has been terrific.
All right. Goodbye.
Okay. All right. Take care. Bye.